Is about to start. Got a great show. Jake Wimberly, ESPN 105.9, The Afternoon Drive in Jackson, Mississippi, will join us. He covers all things top to bottom in the Magnolia State, so you'll learn a lot. You want to be getting your pen and paper handy for this one. Coach Matt Dean over in Memphis at Rhodes College, talking serious college basketball, SEC. How many teams are we going to get in the NCAA tournament? And as Damian Fishback and Dari Noka were discussing on SEC Network, what is going to be success? Final Four or bust? We'll talk about that. And ULM AD John Hartwell checks in. Another perspective. What's going on with all these meetings with the Big Ten, the SEC? Other conferences are certainly going to join in. A lot to cover. Get ready, because here we come.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Jake Wimberly joins us right now. Executive producer Brenden Martin is in the studios in Ocala, Florida. And I want to say this segment brought to you by Rumble Boxing Gym, 1835 Union Avenue, Midtown, Memphis. Open 5 a.m. Monday through Friday till 7:30 p.m. at night. Weekends, Saturday and Sunday, 9 a.m. open. 48 people in these classes, nonstop, 45-minute, 15 3-minute rounds, just like a prize fight with dumbbell work, star jacks, burpees, dips, planks, push-ups, and hitting those 250-pound bags. Wait till you hear Ann Camp Lee, my friend who's the owner and one of our sponsors, talk about her new GM she's bringing in. This guy's brother will be playing in the Super Bowl Sunday for the Kansas City Chiefs. Thank you, Rumble Boxing. Jake, Mississippi State got to win. They had to have last night. Ole Miss is doing well. SEC basketball is getting to be bigger and bigger. What's the story here? Kentucky, was Kentucky as great as they were thought to be? Or is it just because the rest of the SEC didn't commit like they are now? Because this is a brutal league. There's nowhere to hide.
Well, no, and that's a great question. If you go back and look, and I appreciate you guys having me in this morning. It's good to be with you. If you go back and look, and we all remember this, 10, 15, 20 years ago, Kentucky basketball, they, got the best recruits. They had the best talent. You had guys like, remember, we don't see those teams that were built back in the 90s and early 2000s where you have guys that played 2, 3, 4 years. The Bobby Hurley Duke teams. All those guys that stuck together. When the transfer portal era kind of started, it really the one and dones, and we know this with basketball, started more so way before football. Kentucky, kind of took a hit. It would seem like 5 new guys every year, and that was 10 years ago. So I think that's part of it is just not the continuity of the teams year in and year out. And then the league has committed, like you said, to basketball. I mean, outside of the Big 12 this year, you could make an argument that the SEC is the second or third best league in the country. For State and Ole Miss, they're having good basketball seasons, but unfortunately, so is everybody else in the league outside of about 2 teams.
Yeah. Well, it is, Mississippi State gets the win. Humphrey Coliseum, I've been to games there. It's like a can. It's one of those drums, and it's really loud. They got the 75-62 win over Georgia, and Mike White's got Georgia in every game. That was the worst loss they've had in the last 6. And then you look at Chris Beard at Ole Miss. Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, said it last spring, 3 weeks before it was out there. He goes, don't be surprised if Ole Miss doesn't go after Chris Beard. He didn't inherit a stocked roster with talent. Isn't he proof of, in today's world, with the portal, things can change overnight, but also the guy wins everywhere he coaches. It doesn't matter. He could go to, I think, the University of Alaska, Anchorage, and he'd be successful. And the icebreakers. I don't know what they call them.
No, he's fantastic, and that was a great get for Ole Miss, and that is showing out on the basketball court. And you're right. I mean, unlike football, where now obviously National Signing Day Part 2 was yesterday. The transfer portal window will open after spring practice for about 15 days. You look at college basketball. I mean, you can flip a roster 2-3 players, and you can make a big difference on your basketball team. It's just, does your collective have the money now? Because we know that's basketball pound for pound. You're going to pay as much money in basketball as you are football. But Chris Beard, what he has done at Ole Miss is nothing short of amazing to turn that team from what they were last year to this year to a bona fide probably or NCAA team is you got to tip the cap to him on that.
They're 18-5, and they went on the road to South Carolina Tuesday night. In South Carolina, this is the SEC. They're picked 14th, Brenden. And you look at the Gators, the Todd Golden. They've got Auburn coming in to I still call it the O-Dome. But, man, you get the win over Alabama, enjoy it for 30 minutes, and next man up.
Yeah. Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting tournament coming up to see which teams make it, which teams don't. We were talking about it last night, and it's or even yesterday. Says we've just never really seen such a robust, SEC grouping, I guess, lack of a better term, to and some conferences known for football, and around here, I mean, yeah, we still call it the O-Dome too, by the way. You really start to you get excited about basketball when you've got football seasons like we've got in the last couple of years. So you got to get something to get excited about.
Yeah, and Jake, you look at Mississippi State. Question is, are they going to do something new with Humphrey Coliseum? Are they going to just scrap it and start over? The difference, in my opinion, college versus pro, we brag about a stadium being 90 or 100 or 110 years old. The NFL complains about one being older than 15.
Now, when you talk about Humphrey Coliseum, I mean, they've done some modifications to Humphrey Coliseum. I know there's a long-range plan out there for, more modifications. If there's anything for a new basketball arena in Starkville, I have not seen that. That does not mean that that's not on a master plan, that is not visible to the public. Where they would put that thing, I'm not sure, just because of the complexity of that university. But as of now, I mean, you would say, I mean, look, hey, Humphrey Coliseum is still a very nice Coliseum. They've done a lot of great upgrades to it. So, for what Mississippi State is doing, it's perfect, up to this point. But that is a great question. You kind of piqued my interest on that. I'm gonna have to see if we can find some master plans for maybe a possible new arena in Starkville.
Well, they've got one of the best funded colleges of architecture in the South. I know back in the mid 90s when my dad was on that architectural review board at Auburn, he went over to Mississippi State and they looked, it's a beautiful college. It's right by the football stadium in that old building. And whenever Jackie Sherrill's on it, one thing I've noticed about Jackie Sherrill, he is scary smart. He's involved, talking to the law school students at A&M and Mississippi State. He knows how to raise money, but they got a great architecture school, so I'm sure they're going to come up with something cool. They've got the premier baseball facility in the country. All right, now, football-wise, Mississippi State, the Zach Arnett experiment, he was a hell of a coordinator. Again, he comes in, and he tried to completely take a 180 from what got him 9 wins the year before. Number one, question is, why do people try to fix what's working and change it just to be different? Is that all it is? Is it that simple?
Now we're getting into psychology, right? Which is kind of what we do
Yes.
in Sports Talk Radio, right? We try to get in the
Well,
heads
you're
of
an
people.
engineer, by the way.
So, it is a fascinating question, right? I mean, why, and I'm sure you've seen the articles out there, Wyatt Rogers, Will Rogers' father coming out candidly saying, hey, look, Zach Arnett sat in our living room and he basically lied to us and said they wasn't changing anything. And then obviously they changed everything. Football coaches are arrogant to some degree, and they have to be, just like quarterbacks have to be just a little bit. Pitchers, point guards, they all have to have a little bit of arrogance. But there's a difference in arrogance and just being flat foolish and stupid. And, you hate to frame it up that way, but that's what it turned out to be for Zach Arnett. And when you try to make a switch like that so quickly, when you don't have the personnel to do it, this is what you get. But you got to give, props to Zach Selman, for going and finding Jeff Lebby. At least on paper, it looks like he has done a really good job in the transfer portal, bringing some pieces in. It's going to be a relatively younger team, not one of the, not the youngest team in the league this coming up year, but finding players, playmakers, because this team had none of that last year. That was one of the worst coaching jobs in Starkville I've probably seen. You've got to go back at least 20 years, maybe even further than that. You could make an argument some of the Sylvester Croom teams, but even that, I mean, this team this year was one of the worst debaucheries I've ever seen in Starkville.
Well, you left out some of the Rocky Felker teams. On that. And, that's the thing that got me is I thought Zach Arnett was a hell of a coordinator coming. I think he's from Albuquerque. He had a connection to Joe Lee Dunn. Didn't get it done. But I've always noticed this about Mississippi State. They always, and Brenden, you ask your dad, you've seen it. When they line up, they have got some of the most physically gifted and impressive athletes on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And I just, the guy that always sticks out to me, Mississippi State, is Mississippi State's magic man, Marty McDowell from Mobile, Alabama, Tyrone Keys, Dorset Davis, these 6'6", 285-pound guys that can run a 4.8 40, terrifying. And the talent in Mississippi, academically, what's the difference in what's considered passing from high school and junior college in Mississippi versus what's allowed in Alabama and Louisiana? Because that hurts Mississippi, I think, the academic part of guys getting eligible. Because if they could keep the talent, Mississippi is the 9th most talent-rich state in America. And I say it all the time, per capita, more guys have gone and played in the NFL from the state of Mississippi than any other state in the history of this country. Per capita.
Well, yeah, per capita, you're absolutely right. The problem for Mississippi State and Ole Miss is you're battling each other one inside the state. And then anytime that, there is no boundaries, right? You remember Ed Orgeron, when he was at Ole Miss, he talked about he was going to build a fence around Memphis. Yeah. And, we always talked about in the recruiting pitches, hey, we got to build a fence around Florida if you're in Florida, or you build a fence around Tennessee. There are no recruiting fences anymore, right? So Georgia comes in and pulls, some big time players out of here over the last few years. You look at Branson Robinson, one of their running backs. You look at, the big linebacker that N'Kobe Dean had played at Hernando High School. He went to Georgia and I'm playing with Horn Lake, Philadelphia Eagles, just south of where you live. Guys come in here, they have to battle out the Nick Sabans of the world when he was obviously at Alabama. And it's hard to believe that we say that now. When he was at Alabama, still is. Texas A&M, Oregon, Stanford, they're coming in here. It is a great group of talent here. Unfortunately for State and Ole Miss, you got to fight everybody else off to get them. And if you don't believe it, just go look at the rankings, 247 Sports or On3 or whatever subscription you subscribe to, and look at how many other schools came in this recruiting cycle and got some of the top talent out of here.
Well, Brenden, in reference to that, there's 17 junior colleges in Mississippi. And everybody's seen Last Chance U over in Scuba. You take Highway 45 from Memphis down to Orange Beach, the land that time forgot. But that's where it is. And you get 17 junior colleges. Everybody knows about Northwest when Bobby Joe Franklin was there. So many good players went there. And the junior colleges, what's happening with them in Mississippi now with the portal and high school? And Brenden, one of the coolest things that Jake Wimberly does, and you can catch him on the afternoon drive, ESPN 105.9 in Jackson, Mississippi, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. What he does, Brenden, is does a matrix. And I'm going to let you talk about it, Brenden, but or Jake, but the junior colleges, it's such a big deal. I'm just curious what percentage of those junior college guys are signing now compared to pre-October 15th of 2018 when the transfer portal became the law of the land.
Well, first off on the junior college system, and we know this because of the transfer portal and we've got enough information on it now to kind of know how this whole thing works, right? So It doesn't matter what state you're in, just 5, 6, 7 years ago, if you were, let's just say you were considered a 3-star athlete, and if it's Alabama or if it's Auburn or Florida or Mississippi State or Ole Miss, if you had 2 or 3 spots to fill, you may take a shot at a guy who came to your camp, who you said, hey, look, we feel like he could play. It may take 2 or 3 years, but we're going to take a chance on him.
Yes.
Those guys are not getting those opportunities. Talking to a lot of high school football coaches, even here in the state of Mississippi, those young men aren't getting those chances anymore because universities and colleges are holding those spots for transfer portal guys. So that makes those guys either move down a level, either to Division II or Division III or your Mississippi junior colleges. So, I know several guys here in the state of Mississippi, big time players that played 6A, 7A football, biggest classifications, really good football players who ended up going junior college. And not only ended up going to junior college, they're graduating early and they're at those junior colleges now. So just like you would see at a senior college. So, the junior colleges are actually benefiting from this because you're seeing a lot of really good talent. And you're right, the junior college system here has always been phenomenal. You've seen a lot of guys come in from out of state to kind of rebuild their career, their brand. Gardner Minshew played here, went to Northeast, won a national championship in junior college, went on obviously to East Carolina and then to Washington State. So it's still a great, great system. And I tell young men all the time around here in the state, don't apologize and don't feel bad for going to junior college because it is a phenomenal brand of football and it can get you where you need to be.
Well, and that's interesting that you said that about some of these high school kids are going to junior college, but that's what they used to do. I mean, I can remember a guy named Andre Roan from Daytona Beach, Florida, the Sand Crabs. I think that was their nickname. Brenden will correct me if I'm wrong, but Andre went, signed with Auburn, went to Northwest Mississippi Community College, and he and John Avery were teammates. I went and watched them play one time on a Thursday night. And, of course, both ended up at Ole Miss. And I think John Avery was from Mount Airy, North Carolina or something like that. Not too far from Mayberry, I might add. But, Jake, when you put that matrix together, a civil engineer, a mechanical engineer, my dad's an architect. You don't do anything without planning. You have a great show. It's bam, bam, bam. It's awesome content. Right now, in the way too early is what everybody calls it. Looking ahead for next year, where do you see the SEC? We're not going to have divisions anymore. What do you think is going to happen with Oklahoma and Texas coming in? The best thing I've heard was Orville Henry was a great sports writer for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. He has a son named Clay Henry. And a guy was telling us that when Arkansas joined the SEC at the press conference, his son Clay said, Dad, what is this going to mean for Arkansas? He said, son, it's going to be like playing Texas every Saturday. You think Oklahoma and Texas, and there's a few big egos out there, you think they have any idea? And we have a lot of Texas people on this show. And Oklahoma, too, we have them. You think they're ready for it? And you think the SEC is ready for them?
That's we're going to find out, right? And speaking of the hourglass, as I call it, it's just it's a quantitative way to predict, hopefully intelligently, sometimes not so intelligently, college football games way too early, and then of course sports gaming and that kind of stuff, and working on those numbers for this year right now. And just a few years ago, I could release that thing around March. Now with that second transfer portal window, I kind of have to wait and see, and changing the way and I'll get into this another day, and I'll put another kind of introductory piece out on my website once we get closer. But quarterback play, we got all these quarterbacks moving around. That's a part of the equation. You look at talent metrics, and now really trying to, and I've talked to other people who do this around the country. How do you quantify the transfer portal inside a talent metric? Because used to people would say, oh, well, you got to, this team has a 5-year recruiting average of blank, or they have a 4-year. We can't do that anymore because you're really at about 2 classes plus your transfer portal is what you're at. But back to your question about Texas and Oklahoma, I feel like Texas is ready 100%. I think they proved that last year. I think what Steve Sarkisian has done has been has done a great job. Oklahoma, I don't know. I don't know that we know that if they're ready, we're going to see. I mean, they had a lot of attrition on that team, coordinators on both sides. So to answer your question, I think Texas is ready, and I think Texas will probably challenge for the championship in the conference. Oklahoma, it's flip a coin on them. They could fall back in the pack.
Well, you look at Franz Beard is so right, and he's a great writer and a wordsmith. But he said, only God and the Longhorns have more money than the Texas A&M Aggies. A&M has around $19 billion in their endowment. Texas, just over $42 billion. And the state legislature in Texas every year gives 2/3 of the oil and gas money to Austin, 1/3 to College Station. The most of that's coming from the Permian Basin, which produces on average 4.2 million barrels of oil per day. It's just, I mean, it's insane the money they have. You know how many national championships Texas and Texas A&M have won since 1970? One. You know how many the Florida Gators have won? 3. Florida State, 3. Miami, 5. Factor in all these other SEC schools. Money, if money can solve it, it's really not a problem, Jake. Would you agree? Or Brenden? Somebody take that one on, but a wise woman told me that one time.
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, and of course, Brenden, feel free to jump in here. It's real simple for me. You're right. If money solved it all, you're right. Texas and Texas A&M, they would rule college sports. They rule college football for sure.
So would Harvard.
It's way more. Yeah, so would Harvard, exactly. So it's way more complex than that. We know that, right? It's about culture, and a lot of times people think about culture. They think about city culture or country culture. No, how is your culture? How involved is your booster? Your boosters. How involved is your fans? How is your athletic department run? There's a lot that goes into that. So you're right. I mean, if money was the kind of the end all be all, then Texas would rule college football, but that is not true.
Yeah, Brenden, Florida has over 500,000 living alumni. Is that a correct stat?
I don't know if that's a correct stat. I know, we look at our fan base sometimes. I think it's right around 5 million or so people, that we can clock or that somehow track with that. But wow. I have to look up the exact number. It's one of the 5th or 6th, and it's worldwide. So we have a lot of military and so the Gators are sort of different in that aspect because it draws a little bit more. Because now they don't really accept a whole lot of in-state people. So that's one of the big knocks right now is that if you're if your family or your family went there or whatever, you're not an auto in like you used to be. But a lot of the boosters don't like that because hey, I give X amount of dollars every year, my kids should be in. So a lot of in-state kids that get 4.0 students are not getting in. Florida has really emerged academically because it has a lot of these colleges, a lot of medical stuff. And postgraduate stuff. And, they're just doing so much in the state of Florida. There's certainly, the Ivy League per se. So you're really gathering. I always say when we have interns and stuff like that, the best interns I've ever had have come from University of Florida. They're go-getters. The kids are, and they're, and they pull from all over the country. We had one kid from New York and we had, so they leave and graduate, they go back home. So, you think one of the biggest Gator clubs is in the Gotham Gator Club, in New York City, so I think you have a very large swath fan base, which I feel like, the Auburns and the Alabamas and stuff, it's not, it's still huge, but it's more of a regional deal. Kids come, they get a lot in-state, even Georgia, get a lot of in-state kids come there and then they go back home. So Florida's fan base, and I think that's what makes the Florida fan base. It's a tough fan base, let me tell you. I mean, they want to, you still, if you win, you get, people crowing about how you won the game and all that stuff. So it's one of those relentless deals. You come to Gainesville, you're in a fishbowl. Urban Meyer in our podcast talks about that. He says, I remember walking in, after having 7 wins or whatever it was and getting booed inside of a restaurant, so it's a relentless spot.
Well, and Jake, along that line, he talked about the academics and all, a lot of out-of-state students. And, Auburn has, by, I think, university law or rule, got to be 60% at least in-state. I don't know what Ole Miss and Mississippi State's rules are, but I'll tell you one thing. The profit center of your alumni, where the most money comes from when it comes to fundraising, it's typically not going to be the law school or the medical school. You know what it's going to be? The College of Engineering. Those are the dreamers and the thinkers. I look at Mr. Browne, the head of Stryker Medical, Auburn grad. He once gave a gift at Auburn, and he said, "What's the biggest gift that's ever been given?" They said $55 million. And I believe he said, well, I graduated in 1957. Auburn won the national championship. Here's 57 million. Mississippi State got a $100 million gift from one of their graduates in the College of Engineering, Petroleum Engineering. Mississippi State has come a long way. They got an honors college. It's one of the most popular schools among the kids in the private schools in Memphis now. It's a big change in what's going on down there. I know you got to go in just a couple of minutes, but you see what percentage, I bet Mississippi State's 65, 70% in state. And that'll pay off long term.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. There's more out-of-state students likely for sure at Ole Miss. To what degree, I'm not sure, but you're right. I mean, a lot of the 65, 70% is probably accurate. In-state guys and girls go to Mississippi State. And you're right. I mean, that campus has grown so much. They've done so, and it continues to. I mean, I can remember when I walked on that campus in 1996 as a freshman and then walked out of there at 2000, they were building. And you can say this probably for any university. They're still building. They've never stopped. And that's around town. That's on the campus. It seems, like construction never stops, which means they're constantly growing, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I know. Look, I know you've got to get on to other things. Let people know how they can follow you and keep up with you. And as always, we really appreciate you taking time to share with our viewers and listeners. Mississippi top to bottom, and we love it. And you got a great show as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just on X at Jake Wim. You can stream the show if you want to outside the listening area of Mississippi. Just the zone1059.com. We'll be on 3 to 6 today. A lot of Super Bowl, a lot of recap on recruiting and basketball. And Rob, Brenden, appreciate you guys having me in today.
Hey, look forward to next week. Take care.
Absolutely.
Brenden,
right.
what he just said about this, I think when I heard Freddie Weeby, and he is impressive, and I'm looking forward when we can get him on the show.
Oh yeah, we're going to get him next Friday, a week from tomorrow.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So when I was listening to him talk, he's so far out there. He's Domino's Pizza, restaurants, and Matt Dean, John Hartwell will join us in just a minute. But the Spurrier restaurant, it's hard. It's low single digits, the success rate in the restaurant business, and trying to bank on a celebrity's name is harder than people realize, I would believe. But that's a $10 million restaurant. I don't think Florida has even – this is just my opinion. Rebut me. I don't think Florida's even scratched the surface. 23 million people in that state. They are one of 6 schools in America with a college of medicine, law school, and the College of Veterinary Medicine. There's only 6, and Florida's one of them. You call it a public Ivy – I mean, that's almost disrespectful because I've got no use for those Ivy League with what they're doing. Florida's a great school. If they become so serious in academics that they're losing that football culture, that Spartan culture, I mean, they can't. That's what I mean. I'm being serious in saying this because you look at Auburn and Alabama. What do we do for a living, Spartans? You know what they said in the movie. I mean, but you got to have that.
Well, I would say no. I mean, and that's indicative of how bad they've been playing, and they still pack the swamp. Every game is packed 98, 92,000, whatever the numbers always changes. But, you go watch one of our videos on this channel that won't back down, which is the third quarter, after the third quarter, where they turn on Tom Petty and they've got the new HD lights and all that stuff. So you just the fan base it doesn't seem to get less with the smarter kids or anything, because I think that's also where the swamp is, right? So it's on campus, right? So you're right there. It's over 100-year-old stadium, which they're talking about overhauling right now, which is a very sensitive subject with a lot of people, a la Buddy Martin.
Explain that. What they mean?
It's just an old stadium. I mean, it needs work, and I think even one of the conversations was with Scott Strickland, the AD, was like, "Oh, maybe we should build a new one next door," and and it's like, no way, because they've got all around the stadium. You'll see plaques and statues, and Tim Tebow's "The Promise" is written out, and history of people. That's the thing in the swamp. They always joke around. It's not a great place to watch a game because it's hot. Like it's a swamp because it feels like a swamp. And part of becoming a Gator fan is going to sweat it out with your people in the swamp and be miserable. You know what I mean? That's kind of the deal.
Well, I mean, along that line, you look at the way the stadium's designed. It goes down low, and it traps the heat and it traps the noise. And that's why it's one of the toughest places to play. But wouldn't you agree? In college, we hold in reverence how old our stadiums are. In the NFL, it's how new they are. Mm-hmm. That it's all about history, traditions, and heroes. Matt Dean, John Hartwell, let's bring these guys on in here and get your basketballs ready. Coach and athletic director at ULM, John Hartwell. And John, this is the first time you've been on. This is our executive producer, Buddy Martin's son, Brenden Martin, down in Ocala, Florida, in the studio. And we've been talking a lot about Ole Miss, Mississippi State, the SEC, college basketball, everything going on. And stuff is happening so fast. And then Franz Beard threw this out, guys. This is pretty funny. And Franz said, what used to be one of the more fun days in all of college sports, National Signing Day, the first Wednesday of February, yesterday, was like going to Baskin Robbins, where they now have 29 flavors of ice cream. It's a different world we live in. But John, you and Matt see it from an administrative side and also coaching side. Right now, the SEC and Big Ten are talking about trying to save college athletics. Greg Sankey and the commissioner of the Big Ten, whoever wants to tackle this one first, what are they really doing, or is this just for show?
I wouldn't say it's for show. You've got opinions out there, all ends of the spectrum. Oh gosh, this is the end of college athletics as we know it. The sky, Chicken Little, the sky is falling.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case, but I don't think the overarching intentions of the Big Ten or the SEC are to break away. I will say both of those leagues, they are at the top of the food chain in terms of revenues, but they're also at the top of the food chain in terms of being under intense pressure to kind of lead the way into whatever our next iteration of college athletics is. The other thing that I think is different today than it's been in the past, and you've seen bits and pieces of people alluding to this, in the whole Florida State deal, you started to hear the term private equity come about, which really has not been existent in college athletics previously. I do think that there are private equity firms out there that are sniffing around, that they see the revenue that already has been generated and the future potential revenue opportunities from the highest level of college athletics, particularly as it relates to football. And so I think you do have, I know you've got private equity firms who are making overtures at some of these programs. So I think all of those things combined with, NCAA President Charlie Baker's, teasing, if you will, at the NCAA convention of what a new model looks like. I think all of that has played into this. You've got the House Oliver suit out there that, for those listeners that don't know this, is trying to go back basically to all student athletes since 2016 and say, hey, really NIL should have been available then. I'm trying to figure out, I told a group of our coaches and administrators the other day, I wish this stuff would go back to the mid '80s when I was a student athlete, and I could get a little bit off of that. But I think the statute of limitations has far run its course since that time. But all of those things I think are playing in here. But does Auburn or Alabama or Arkansas or whoever want to stop playing? Do they want to play 12 Power 5 games a year and then go into the playoff system? Absolutely not. No. So I think there is a way forward. Is it going to look like it does today? No. But, I think there is change on the horizon for sure. And in all of these iterations, all the different issues we're dealing with, and no offense to any of the attorneys out there listening, because I know you've got quite a few. The attorneys are the only ones winning at this right now, because at every turn, no matter which way you go, there are going to be lawsuits filed.
I agree. And one thing, and we brought it up on the show in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been saying this, the same thing you said. Private equity firms are going to start getting involved. Venture capital, the VC crowd. But that's capitalism. Matt, you've got people that graduated from Rhodes, and you picked a college. They're going to say, well, wow, we could get involved. And I see a good question from David Arnoff, this guy's very smart. I believe he's a doctor in Panama City. Private equity and athletics. Oh, Lord. Talk about pricing out the average fan. We better be careful about that. And what here's the thing. When you get too many corporate people sitting in the stadium, you lose your atmosphere, Matt Dean.
Good morning, guys. Great to be back on. John, great to see you. I know it's been a while. One of the things I want to add to what John said, and I think the average fan doesn't know this exists. John and I do, because we're in athletic administration. But yes, the SEC and the Big Ten are having conversations, but I want to know what the college presidents are thinking, because I think they drive this model a lot, John. And when we start talking about private equity, I know for a fact that one of the concerns across the board for college presidents is the pie is shrinking. And what I mean by that is, because of the NIL money, because of the commitment that normal donors of the college are taking away from infrastructure projects and going towards the student athletes, everyone has a concern to raise their profile from a development standpoint. And I think we can't lose sight of that. I know we get upset sometimes about what NIL has done from a fairness standpoint, but it's also really triggered at the development level somewhat of a crisis for a lot of schools right now. Schools are struggling because of our inflationary times. You know this, Rob. You're the guru. Because of our inflationary times right now, donations are down across the board, okay? So the college presidents, I think, are talking to the directors of athletics at all these institutions and saying, how can we control this? And I think SEC and Big Ten, they're, like John said, they're just coming up with some models right now to put on the board. At the end of the day, we're going to see something different here in the next few years.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of good comments coming in. I mean, David Arnoff, again, this dovetails into my belief in relegation. Any thoughts? It would allow for the institutions to focus on what they want. John and Brenden, John has a background with E&Y in public accounting. Ran private business with 40 million plus in revenues. He's a Citadel grad. You are the true student athlete. You didn't get you didn't go to the Citadel because they bought you a new Trans Am with a big old silver eagle on the front. You went because they played Skinnerd all the time in your dorm. No, I'm kidding. But look what you're doing at ULM. I mean, you have a reputation as you don't mess around. Okay, you come in and you get stuff done, which is why having you as an athletic director or Matt as an athletic director, it makes a difference who you have. Because I think a lot of these guys are administrators who, some of them have never worked outside of being a government employee. You and Matt both understand this. You have business sense. And what percentage of the athletic directors out there do you think really understand how to read a balance sheet, how to go make an ask, and understand that wealthy people are all tuned into the same radio station? You're listening to WIIFM. What's in it for me? You got to understand the tax deal, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's becoming even more imperative that, as an athletic director, you don't necessarily have to be a CPA. There's 3 or 4 of us who have come from that background. Jamie Pollard at Iowa State, Rob Mullins at Oregon, myself, maybe 1 or 2 others. But you better have an understanding of the economics around it and the dynamics that plays, not just within the economics on your own campus, but the economics of your donors, whether that's to major gifts or construction projects or your NIL collective or any of those things, they all play into this. And, as we talk about private equity getting potentially involved in college football or college athletics, and we've talked about this on here before, Rob, is one of the first things you've got to consider, and the institution has to consider. All of a sudden there's a revenue share. There are all these things. There's private equity involved. The tax exempt status of the institution clearly comes into jeopardy at that time, and then that brings on a whole nother set of dynamics for the institution. So be careful what you wish for. The other thing is, as you get into this, let's say we go to a pay for play model, and all of a sudden
we're already there, aren't we?
Well,
in the SEC we are,
where they become defined as employees, just like the National Labor Relations Board deemed the basketball players at Dartmouth. So all of a sudden you become an employee, then you know what? You can get a yellow card in your locker after a poor performance. Nowhere in college athletics do we have where somebody's on a full ride and they drop 3 passes in a game, or they go 0 for 12 from the field in a basketball game, or they go, on a 25 at-bat hitless streak where they're cut from the team or their scholarship is taken away. All of a sudden you go to an employee situation, and those things are going to start happening. So, for the idealist, if you will, that say, hey, college athletics is this huge money-making machine, which, that's hard to argue, is you come out with it, and be careful what you wish for, because what is being lost in all of this, and I know I'm somewhat of a purist in this, is they're still at an institution of higher learning. We have totally discarded the educational process in this as it relates to the classroom. And that's something that, we can't totally lose sight of that.
Yeah. Now, look, it's just great stuff. And I want to flip into basketball, what happened last night. And Matt, you and Brenden and John, we all watched the color TV last night. Auburn 99, Alabama 81. It's almost like Bruce Pearl was having fun not going over 100, Matt. But what did you see? That IBOB, as Kevin Skarbinski calls it, the Iron Bowl of basketball, it's got to become its own entity. But that's a hell of a rivalry in every sport. But it's healthy for college basketball to have an in-state rivalry like that. Bruce Pearl, Nate Oates, these guys there's no limit to what they can do.
From my perspective, I see 2 teams that can get into the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. I mean, I also think Auburn has got a unique roster and can make a run at the Final Four. I also want to take it a step further. You look at what transpired in the NBC last weekend. First of all, South Carolina wins at Tennessee. Then Tennessee goes to Rupp, and I'm thinking, well, Tennessee's going to take a step back, and then they go in there and they take care of Kentucky. I mean, the SEC, I think, has 4 teams right now with 2 losses at the top of the league. I really think the SEC has tremendous balance. I think both those teams last night have a chance to go deep into the tournament. I like where the league is right now. I know everyone talks about the Big 12, and it's a very difficult league. What Houston did last weekend at Kansas, Kansas did to Houston last weekend, then Kansas State beats Kansas. There's so much balance in the Big 12. It's going to be a really fun March Madness. I've said this before. I talked to a Big 12 college football basketball official after one of our games. He was working on a Sunday. He said there's no dominant team. It's somewhat broken because of all the factors in NIL. There's a lot of parity, a lot of balance. No team is perfect out there, and it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, it is. And the interest in basketball is off the charts. And I'll throw this one, and I've been asking this a lot lately. Kentucky's last national championship, guys, was 2012. Last Final Four, 2015. And
wow.
Back in 2014, when the SEC, August of 14, launched the SEC network, former commissioner, rest his soul, Mike Slive, issued an ultimatum basically to the SEC schools. You better ramp up the product because, we're Ruth Chris Steakhouse. We can't be serving Swanson's TV Salisbury steaks for dinner and charging high prices. Get with it. And when that bell was rung, everybody in the SEC started pumping more money. Florida's got 2 national titles. Arkansas's got 1, and that's it in the SEC, other than Kentucky's 8. John Hartwell will start bouncing this around fast pace. Kentucky, they were great when the rest of the SEC looked at football as football, recruiting, spring practice, and then basketball. But now they put basketball up there like Kentucky. Kentucky is paying John Calipari $1 gazillion, and they're good, but they're not winning like they used to.
Yeah, but I think part of that is not that Kentucky basketball has fallen off. I think, as you mentioned, the investment from the rest of the SEC, everybody else in the league has, raised their level of competition. And I'll say this, going back to the Auburn-Alabama game, and this is no disrespect to the Sonny Smith, Wimp Sanderson battles. What games like that do, especially in the state of Alabama, and somebody who grew up in that state is primarily a basketball player. You're exactly right. Basketball was an afterthought, really a third place afterthought from a high school level to football and baseball, and not to knock either one of those sports. The state continues to pump out a ton of not only college level players in both of those sports, but at the professional level as well. But the interest in that game last night, not just in the state of Alabama, but what it showed on a national, level, was there's really good basketball in the state of Alabama and in the SEC beyond what Kentucky can do. And again, I think kudos back to Mike Sly's vision and what has continued in that league. The investment in basketball has paid off. And I'll say this, it's got to be a planned, concerted effort, just like it was when I was an athletic director in the Mountain West Conference. You look at the Mountain West now, you've got 5, arguably 6 teams that are there in the top 5, in the top 50 RPI. You could have 5 teams in the Mountain West make the NCAA tournament.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what I love. There's nothing like March Madness. 357 teams are eligible, and it is America. It's Horatio Alger on parade, rising up from the little school, St. Peter's. You pick the school, but this is what we love about basketball. And what's happening in the SEC, Brenden, you see it in Gainesville. You got Todd Golden there. I was listening to Bruce Pearl on the Auburn Basketball Network, Andy Burcham and Sonny Smith, talking with him. He goes, look, I got to go play one of my guys. I mean, he knows Todd Golden. Florida, you pick the school, there's a commitment. But Brenden, along the line of what John just said, when Florida won those back-to-back national championships, Urban Meyer was there too. Who took up all the oxygen in the room when they walked in?
Oh, Urban Meyer. I mean, look, it will always be a football school in a lot of ways, but I think what's happening in the football program sort of happening at the same time in the basketball program because it happened at the same time. There's a hangover there, right? It's like, when are we going to return to dominance? When are we going to get back? I remember when we were covering both teams back then, Dad looked at me and said, remember this time, you'll never see it again. Like in your lifetime, you'll never see it again. And he was right, obviously, but it's like, of course, and I think that's the struggle to be Gator fan right now in these two sports, because, you're just not happy. I mean, Todd Golden is the guy, but Mike White was the guy, so it's like, and now he's over at Georgia. So when you win back to back, there's something happens. Like it's not a one-off, right? And so you that fan, you got all those years and all those fans that just got used to being that way. And fan does not change their mind. Like they think we should be there every year. And so I think that's sort of the issue.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw this one at you, Matt. With as down as Auburn football has been for a while, I mean, the worst 3-year cycle since 1948, 49, 50, 3 straight losing seasons. You're looking at a generation of Auburn students and fans that are growing up with football being after basketball. And who would have ever thought that would be happening? I mean, when I was at Auburn, we went to 5 straight NCAA tournaments. And I'm serious. Look at Auburn puts 90,000 in for all those games. But Bruce Pearl, he doesn't make excuse. When he gets beat, he's mad as hell. But I see this happening now, Matt, in college basketball. It's not. I don't think anyone ever saw this coming, but there are a lot of schools where basketball is bigger than football now. I mean, in a way, in terms of it's getting more recognition for them because their football team is struggling, or baseball, whatever.
You know what's interesting about basketball? If you just take it from a historical standpoint, Brenden, Florida 06-07 are the last team to go back to back. Before that, it was Duke in 91-92. Before that, it was the great UCLA teams, if I'm not mistaken. It is really hard to go back to back. And the team I keep forgetting to talk about when we talk about college basketball, UConn has a team that could potentially go back to back. They are really, really good. They would have to be everyone's Final Four, or most people's Final Four pick right now. If you did your brackets today, they're the AP number 1 team in the country. But I think there's just, we go back to the creation of One Shining Moment, that song, and what everything encapsulates in college basketball, that you don't have to be dominant. You just got to get hot. Let's be honest. In college football, if you don't have a great line of scrimmage, if you have a quarterback who can throw the ball, you're not going to win a national championship. That's right. In basketball, if I got 4 or 5 guys that are playing well at the right time, play with anyone in the country, especially if I'm coached properly. And Brenden, I go back to Billy Donovan, who unfortunately I'm a Chicago Bulls fan because of Michael Jordan's creation, right? So right now, Billy D is my guy in Chicago. In basketball, even though you can get hot and make a run, it's still hard to find chemistry, even at the highest levels, no matter what the salary cap is, no matter what you're paying these guys. You rarely see back-to-backs, and that's why I go back in the 90s. The Bulls won 6 of 8, and if it wouldn't have been for Michael Jordan leaving basketball for whatever reason you want to describe, they might have won 8 in a row. I'm just telling you, they were that dominant in the whole decade.
Hey, Rob, to pick up on that, and I'm going to throw in the effects of the transfer portal and NIL as it relates to basketball, and to pick up on 2 things you guys talked about. One, chemistry. And when you look at those teams, in recent history who have made runs, maybe out of, left field a little bit, if you will, whether it's FAU or San Diego State or some of those teams, one of the things those teams had in common was the nucleus of their teams. Those guys had played together for 3 years. They knew everything that each other was doing on the court. Yeah. Now in this world of, NIL and the transfer portal, that's going to become more and more rare. But on the flip side, where NIL helps you, especially in basketball, as y'all know, if you have 1 or 2 dudes and you have some role players around them, you can get on a hot streak and really make some noise in the month of March. So those are dynamics, one a positive, maybe one a negative, that I believe as it relates to March Madness through the next few years are going to make it even more exciting. And again, as we go back to transformation of college athletics, what is it going to look like? The one thing that is holding everything together right now is March Madness. Nobody, including the Big Ten and the SEC, nobody wants to lose the magic nor the money of March Madness.
Yes.
No. I'll throw a comparison, John, along the line of what you said about the guys playing together for 3 years, 4 years. In the investment world, you have 2 kinds of management. You have passive management and active management. Some, you have a portfolio of 10 or 20 stocks, preferably dividend stocks that 3, 4, 5% dividends that hadn't missed in 100 years. Then you've got active management. what you have now in college athletics, basketball in this case, is active management. You're buying and selling all the time. And there's consequences to that. You can react too quickly because emotions hurt people more than anything when it comes to investing. Same thing with fan bases. You get rid of a coach after 2 or 3 years. Now coaches, after their first year, Hugh Freeze is saying, if I don't get things going, I'm not going to be here past 25, 26. That's how they think. And if I was a coach now and I'm married and I've got 4 or 5 kids, I'm feeling heat from my wife because I don't care how much money you make. You've got to recruit your own team. You got to worry about the portal. You got to worry about NIL. You got guys coming in and going, let's make a deal. Monty Hall, this is what we are. Matt Dean, can you imagine, or Brenden or John, an athlete, an 18-year-old kid coming into you and telling you how to do your job? I can't even, I'm just not from that planet, nor are my kids. My kids they have better respect than that. The problem is the adults are trying to be best friends with these people. That's just what I think's happening, Matt. I was at lunch with you. I went to lunch with Matt over at Rhodes last week. People love him over there. And he's put in 33 years coaching men's and women's basketball. What you're doing, John, it's invaluable when you got people. But Matt, talk about that, the constant change. How do you develop chemistry when you have no chemistry?
First of all, John, he loves our cheeseburgers at Rhodes College. I want you to know that, first of all.
Good.
Rob loves that cheeseburger at Rhodes College. But
hey, was that why he was telling me about it being happy hour there? And it was 2 for 1. He buys one, he gets a second one free.
Rob, yes. It was. But I think what you're describing, Rob, in a nutshell, is continuity. And over time, John's exactly right. In basketball, kind of like I alluded to as well, you get hot and you're first of all, you got to stay healthy. You got to stay healthy because basketball can dramatically change when one person, and it could be a non-scoring person. It could be your point guard. Your point guard may be averaging 5 points a game, but it's a great on-ball defender, and he or she averages a 3-to-1 turnover assist ratio and just gets the thing. If you lose a player for a period of time, it affects with that continuity. It affects with that chemistry. So in basketball, that's why you don't see we'll never see the UCLAs ever again. There's just so many good teams that can put what John's talking about on the floor. I'll give you a great example. I thought about this in the early 2010s. I was fortunate to coach a great group of young women. Over a 2-year period, we went 50-8, back-to-back 25-win seasons. And, one of the blessings of that is you can line up in base. And what I mean by that, you go out and play people straight up and kick their butt. But sometimes what you forget about when you're so good are kind of like the nuances of the game. So the third title we won in a row, and those kids graduated for the most part, we had to play triangle and 2 for 40 minutes in the championship game. And I was thinking there that I'm like, it works so well. Why didn't I ever do that with my better teams? And part of it is because I didn't think I had to. But I think as you evolve over as a coach, you realize that you need to teach your kids every way to play. And that, if we do this in October, in March, I may need to have a side out bounds play that we haven't used in a while. I may need to go after a timeout, after an ATO. I may need to go from a man to a zone. And I think coaches evolve too. And that's what we always talk about players. But I know I improved so much as a coach in my 26 plus years as a coach that I was a heck of a lot better on both sides of the ball year 26 than I was year 1. And we forget about that. And my mentor said every day, we got to get better every day. And we truly felt that. And sometimes it's not tangible. Sometimes it's just a feeling that permeates amongst the team. And you just felt like you had a really good practice. And if you leave the floor thinking like that, it's going to carry over.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to one of the South Carolina players being interviewed after the Ole Miss game Tuesday night. He said, we were picked 14th in the league, but we didn't believe that. It kind of goes back to don't let other people walk through your mind with their dirty feet, guys. That's what Gandhi said. I didn't come up with that quote, but I agree with that. I mean, if you start listening to what other people say about you, I mean, when I'm out riding, I love to listen to motivation tapes. And I was watching something last night. Jason Perry, my friend, was texting me something. Steve Jobs, I believe in people. We don't have a lot of committees here at Apple. I have people that are in charge of different things, and I go talk to them. John, you're an athletic director at ULM. You hired Missy Bilderback. You're making some changes. You got a new football coach that's come in there. You get 17 sports. So one coach is football, one's women's basketball, one's soccer, whatever. You're really a coach of 17 sports. Is there ever a lull other than when you're sleeping? There's always something going on. Do we have too many people in the kitchen now, too many cooks in the kitchen now at a lot of these colleges? You've been an AD, you've been an associate AD, you've been at Ole Miss, you've been at Troy, you've been at Georgia State, Utah State, now you're at ULM. Kind of your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know that we have too many cooks in the kitchen. I think what you've got to make sure is your internal organizational structure is really sound. How coaches report up through associate ADs or athletic directors. Normally you have a situation where your marquee revenue sports, football, men's basketball, baseball, and in some cases women's basketball will report directly to the athletic director. You have other people involved in it who handle some of the day-to-day things, but the high-level things, obviously the athletic director gets in. What you can't always control are those external influences, and there are a ton in college athletics. I know Rob likes to refer to the foghorn leghorn, to the fictitious foghorn leghorn donor. We all have those, so you've got to manage some of those. You've got to manage relationships across campus with your president and others, faculty and folks like that. So there are a lot of moving pieces to it. And the priority level of those pieces, depending on the day, can change from day to day. But I think, it's about people and it's about the relationships. We can't lose sight of that. One thing I did want to mention to you guys, and this kind of encompasses everything that we're talking about, probably a bigger story here in the state of Louisiana the last couple of days than the rest of the country. But the rest of the country knows about this. So you've got Will Wade, who goes into McNeese State. They're 20-3 now, and they just announced yesterday that Will Wade has signed a new 5-year, $700,000 a year deal. And people are saying, how in the hell can McNeese State pay $700,000 a year for a basketball coach? But again, they've invested. He's had a couple of it, and this is not a secret. I'm not disclosing anything that a lot of people don't know. He's had 2 or 3 of his boys, if you will, come from LSU to help him out with some NIL deals. And he's got players in there. There's a reason why they went to Michigan State and won, and they've won a couple of other Power 5 games. But that is the power in today's setting where NIL and dollars investment can get you well really quickly in terms of being able to win.
And that's interesting because I was going to ask you, what you thought about this sort of story developing as yesterday's press conference where Billy Napier, he came out and did his national signing day, whatever. He does a press conference. It's just really just the state of the program, and but the scuttlebutt, which was on my dad's show last night, the Buddy Martin show, which was that Billy pulled together his staff, his coaching staff, and demand that we don't know if demanded or not the right word, but told them to unfollow certain media members from their social media. And then of course that story gets out, and then of course those who thought that they were were on that list go check, and sure enough they were unfollowed by this on Twitter and stuff like that. So it's like this attempt to be, over controlling, overstepping, in a sense, like you're the football program. Now you're making these decisions that are going to have, potential ripple effects throughout all your programs, right? Because that's a PR thing. doesn't look so good. How do you deal, on the other side of that as the AD, you come in? I mean, obviously that's not a good look. I mean, you don't have to, you don't want to do that. And he's increasingly trying to cut out everything to do with the media. How important is that, especially now with NIL and all this stuff? You need good relations. That's free pub, man. Any pub's good pub, right? That's, in a lot of ways. And that hurts your athlete, right? Who's trying to, you're trying to raise money out there, and then you've got this other thing. Just kind of react, Matt. Start with you. How do you react to something like that?
Well, I'll go quickly because John's probably got more to say about this, Brenden. But the reality is, my background before I got into coaching was broadcast news journalism. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to embrace the criticism, and you can't be naive that even when your house is very clean, that someone won't think there's a dirty corner or whatever. So I find that extremely petty, what went down. From our perspective, we're very concerned about what we put out on social media. We want to be conscious of all the things that matter to us from a PR standpoint. One bad tweet or text can really ruin a year's worth of work. So if that is true, what happened, and it gets out, I just think it's really it lessens in my mind the credibility of the head coach, because you can't let that get out. If you're going to do that, it can't get out to the public. That's all I'm saying. I mean, it's just an incredibly bad look for Florida football, in my opinion.
John?
Yeah, I think transparency, especially in dealing with the media, and this probably dates me a little bit. You can't get into a battle with the media. The term that, and I'm not original to this at all, but that I heard as a younger administrator coming up through collegiate athletics, the media is always going to get the last word. So why would you want to get into a battle you're not going to get the last word on? And so one of the things that I've always tried to do is to be as transparent and as accommodating to the media as you can be, because that, you simplify things, the golden rule, you want to be treated like you want people to treat you. So, and there are things as an athletic director, as a head coach, where you can't talk in detail about some detailed disciplinary things or some HR issues or some issues with student athletes, but you got to be willing to own the good and the bad. And I think, in the long run, those coaches, those athletic directors that do that, the respect level goes up significantly, both amongst their peers and with folks in the media.
Yeah, and it just feels like, to me, when something that happens, especially Billy being but on the hot seat or under the gun here, which he needs to start producing. He's had all the time in the world. This year is his telltale sign. He said yesterday, best all around team he's had so far. Coming out this year, great. You haven't won, and you're at Florida, you're right now, it looks like it's getting to you. That's the vibe that I get. It's like you're feeling it. And, and if I'm also like a player, right, and I'm playing under this guy and I'm trying to make some money, right, like I got my NIL, that doesn't help me, at all, and so, if he said that to the coaches, what's he saying to the players now? And I've asked this directly to Scott Strickland, at a press conference or at a luncheon. I said, how do you control the players' social media? Because that's really right now one of the only avenues that they can really cash in a corporate sense on the NIL, because they can't wear logos, go onto the field, hold a Coca-Cola and say, get Coke, right? Because you're going to go against all the other stuff. And I think that's one of the major issues with the NIL, is that there's no real way to make money, because you can't associate yourself with the brand of the school and all their rights and all that. And maybe that's where we're getting into this, this Florida State thing, and they're, figuring out ways to, kind of get, share in maybe some of these avenues, until the rules change as far as like the rights and all that are concerned, with the schools being able to, somehow connect themselves, to the student athlete and the collectives, right? Because we're just in a pay for play model, right? And there's no way to avoid that. I mean, that's why we have, it's like fundraising. I mean, remember, like, you're listening to public radio and like once a month, it's like, okay, guys, well, we've raised this much money. I mean,
Yeah.
that's literally what these collectives are at now, with, with donation websites and you see it on the groups, everyone join in, give them $20, like tithing to a church, for God's sakes. I need 8% of my income to go, 10% of my income to go to the Florida Gators. That to me is incredibly broken. And for a coach to come out and sort of now say, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, it's really tone deaf to me. And a lot of, being a media member, it's like, we just get cut out more and more and more and more and more. That's not what you want. And it does, like I say, have, lack of a better term, repeat myself, but ripple effect through all your sports, especially your non-rev sports. And you've got these other female coaches in basketball who are doing the opposite, going up after the end of the games, signing autographs, making an effort to do their PR. It's like, to them, it's like middle finger. Thanks, Billy. Like, you suck. Like, I'm trying to like fix it, and you're just breaking it.
Yeah. Hey, Brenden, one of the things I was going to mention, and that's a perfect example of it. I tell coaches all the time, and it applies to administrators too. You better build all the equity you can with your constituents, whether it's donors, alums, people across campus, because you're going to have to use some equity from time to time, whether it's you have a poor season, whether it's you have an off the field incident with a player or two, all of those things. You better build as much equity as you can, because if you don't, it's going to come back to bite you in the tail at some point.
Yeah, well, one thing this is a great conversation, which all of y'all are bringing it up here. And another one is the media relations directors, for the most part at colleges, are just in the business of telling you, no, you can't do this. Yeah. This all started after 9/11, to be completely transparent, blocking people from parking and tailgating on campus and pushing everybody several miles away from campus where you got to ride a bus to the stadium. This crap's got to stop. I mean, these are public, state-funded, taxpayer-funded universities. And these administrators act like they're private entities. And, you get, it's ridiculous that, I like, for example, Auburn baseball coach Butch Thompson, you can't get any better than that guy. Greg Williams, equestrian coach, they'll come on this show. Now, you try to get a football coach, I understand they're in demand. But you know what the problem is now? Most of these coaches, they don't have anything to do with the local media in these college towns. They just want to go to the national media. And John, Matt, Brenden, you all know this. You said it. You better be careful with that stuff, because you're going to run out of friends. And if you are flirting with other jobs and driving your fan base crazy, they're going to get rid of you at the first sign of weakness. And that's where we are. The not letting practices be open. I mean, what are you afraid of? We've got to get rid of this
15
paranoia
you're getting for like your entire spring practice, or like one open day where they're just doing drills. And then as the media member in the fall practice, you're getting a 15-minute viewing window where you get to watch warm-ups and calisthenics. Like, that's it. And then you wonder why they jump on you when you're having a bad season. It's like, you told us how great you were in your presser. You told us how awesome and built and how much more in shape you were. And basically the media is going to be like, well, you lied, and you didn't let us tell the story before. So it's like putting a fake picture on a dating website. You're going to meet that guy or girl eventually, and they're going to know that's not you.
Yeah. If they're smart, you open practice up to the public. You open the university up to the public, because these are your fans. Buddy Martin always talks about it on orangeandbluebloods.com. Who owns college sports? It's the fans. And I understand coaches are going to have, private meetings with the players, but also they're going to say, keep this stuff off social media. And Matt, the players and John, they got to respect that. But I'm going to tell you something. All these media relations directors, these people, a lot of them are just they have a little man complex. It gives them power to deny people access. But I'm going to tell you something. Coach goes out there, and I'll give you an example with Hugh Freeze at Auburn. I know you know him well, John. I don't know him. I know a lot of people that do. But he didn't help himself last year when he complained about having to go across the country to play Cal, about the long trip. I would have said, what an opportunity to take the Auburn brand across the country to the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, where Auburn's got a ton of alumni in all those high-tech companies because of the great Samuel Ginn College of Engineering. And we're going to have a great time out there, play a Pac-12 program that's produced a lot of great players like, Marshawn Lynch, Aaron Rodgers, Steve Bartkowski. What an opportunity. And then rushing to and playing patty cake in that Alabama game. My support group meets weekly on Thursdays at 7 p.m. to talk about 4th and 31, the grave digger. The Bama people, this is their kick six. But, if you make, like at ULM or at Rhodes, Matt, I'll tell you what Matt did for the Eddie Murphy Track and Field Complex, what Rhodes College did. You get some of the best athletes in the world, and we're going to talk a lot about this event. They open up that university, which is gorgeous. John, you've got concerts on your campus. And then here we are, Brenden and Buddy Martin, one of the legendary sports writers in America, try to get access to the coach. Buddy said it best last year. Florida's defensive coordinator left. He goes, well, I would say we're going to miss you, but I never knew you. It's just as only Buddy Martin can say.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead. Answer that.
Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was just gonna say it's even sort of further with what kills me right now is like the new structure. The org chart is now really weird, right? It's like we've got the analytics and the people that are the research people, like running around behind a coach or giving him all the analytics, and then you're like, well, you're co-defensive coordinator, but you manage the defense, but you're going to call the plays, and we're seeing a lot of that now at Florida, which, by the way, has the largest coaching staff on football team in the history of college football. So like, how do you, to me, it's like, it's like a bad game of telephone, right? It's like, and we saw it this year with, trying to keep your sideline organized. You couldn't even get a field goal unit on the damn field at the right time, and this year you think, oh, I'm going to go get this next guy and this next coach at some point, right? It's like, what has happened to because we talk about players all the time. What's happening to coaches? They're gone to the NFL, but they recruited all these guys. We got Saban's now leaving, and we're seeing, and now they have the automatic 30-day window where you can just it's like bonanza yard sale out there. You know what I mean? It's just, it is. It truly is like it's so hard to follow in general. I can't imagine like an AD or what like going into work must be like, God, what is going to happen today?
Yeah, and John, Brenden, I didn't mean to cut you off. John's got to go here in about 2 minutes, but I agree. Bring your fans in. They're shareholders. Now what you've got is you're paying these coaches all this money, and nobody likes somebody with a lot of money that's a jerk or a snob. That's what we're creating, snob appeal for coaches. I don't like it.
Yeah, I would just add this, it's tough to buy in to someone or a program when their outward message is woe is me. When comparatively speaking, you have all the tools necessary to be successful. And I think when you do that, you set yourself up for criticism, just like you do when you shut things down and you don't, I tell our coaches and our staff, hey, let's control the narrative. But if you go the woe is me route, or you go the, hey, we're not going to give you any access at all route, you're allowing someone else to control the narrative. So I think that's pretty bad. Hey, I did want to answer real quick before I have to go, guys, and enjoy as always being with y'all.
Let people know how they can follow you, John, as well.
Yeah. Twitter, John_Hartwell. And for anything and everything ULM Warhawks athletics, ULMWarhawks.com. I will say this: we had the number 4 ranked recruiting class in the Sun Belt Conference, which is an incredible victory, if you will, for Coach Bryant Vincent and his staff, only being 2 months on the job. Our highest ranked recruiting class, certainly in the last 8 or 10 years, and I think maybe of all time. To answer one quick question on there, does Hartwell have to deal much with NIL in Monroe? Yes, we probably have 20 of our football guys who are on some type of NIL, and candidly, we had a couple of battles that came down to the end earlier this week, and the golden rule, we lost a couple to those schools that had more bigger pot of gold, both of them Power 5 institutions. But it does play a part for us, and will continue to play a bigger part. But guys, as always, thank you all so much, and y'all have a great day.
Hey,
Thanks,
thank
John.
you as well. We'll talk to you next week. And, Matt, talk about what he just said. You see what I'm saying? I don't like football coaches. I don't, people make money. That's fine. I know plenty of people that make a lot of money that are kind, and they do a lot of stuff, mostly off the record, anonymously. When people, what drives me crazy is people do their job and they want to get on social media and go, look at me, I'm raking the yard, or I'm cutting the grass or whatever. Who gives a damn? Do your job and shut up. Just go do it. But it drives fans crazy. Brendan's right. I mean, look what Gatorbait Media and his dad and friends and, Ben Troop, the Buddy Martin show, David Whitley from the Gainesville Sun, they're working their asses off to tell stories, and denied access. Then these coaches, you're right. I'm sorry, Billy Napier, or any coach, you're making $5 to $10 million a year. Nobody is going to have any pity for you or feel sorry for you. You just, you can say, well, you're just outdated. That's just the way it is. I'm not buying that. And we can also change that, Matt, can't we?
Well, John made an interesting reference there in his last statement. He was talking essentially about being appreciative for resources. And if you look where Billy came for his last head coaching job, you would think some of the language that's come out would never have transpired, because he has everything. He has history, he has resources, he has an incredible fan base that wants to know everything about the program. So the language that's coming out, it's really scary to me. I think this is a put up or shut up year for his program. If you're going to say we finally got the talent, however you want to phrase it, we got to win games now, Billy. Otherwise, you're gone. I mean, I think it's pretty simple formula. And, one of the other things that I think that's interesting when I hear this conversation, when I talk to my staff, when I talk to my players, we always talk about eliminating the outside noise. It's no different if you're at the foul line, clear the mechanism, going back to one of my favorite movies with Kevin Costner, For the Love of the Game. And it's incredibly short-sighted to do what he did and tell your coaches to unfollow media members. I mean, you are the leader of one of the most prominent college football programs in the history of what we do. I mean, can you imagine? I'm sure Saban got pissed a lot of times at the media. We've seen it.
Oh, we've seen it.
But you don't ever do those type of things. I just think you can't come back from that, Brendan. I don't see how you come back from that unless you have an incredible year. And I looked at how tough your schedule is next year. I don't see that happening. You know what I'm saying?
It's not a good look.
It's not. I mean, you can't come back from that, in my opinion.
I agree.
I think that's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I think it's a great point.
Yeah, and I'll just close by saying this. The great sports information directors that we always talk about, Claude Felton just stepped down last week at Georgia, a legend. That press box was the gateway, the front porch of that university to the rest of America and the world. The message here is to coaches, open up and bring the fans back in. The fans are frustrated. You can't even keep up with who's on the roster. It's like looking at an actively managed portfolio versus one where you buy and hold. And we've got to get back. Simple Town USA, Buddy Martin's the mayor. The newspaper's $1 a year, and they still deliver fresh milk every morning in glass bottles. Look, we're going to figure this stuff out. But damn, Matt and Brenden and John Hartwell and Jake Wimberly, thank y'all. This was awesome topics. And, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Don't ever forget it, and don't ever miss an opportunity, Matt. You know this, and Brenden, to help other people out. That's what this show does. We try to solve problems. But if I'm a coach, if I'm Billy Napier, I try to walk that back and go, man, that was a stupid call on my part.
Yeah.
And don't ever do that, because he's going to regret it. Yeah, you can't unfix stupid like that. That was dumb. And the only thing he can do to I guess, fix that is to go undefeated next year. And good luck on that.
Well, it also would help him if he would come on Buddy's show. My father, who's interviewed every coach for the last 35 years.
Yes.
And he won't do an interview with this guy. Like, that's part of the old school.
Yeah. Matt, you had something real quick.
Well, I just want to end with this thought. I grew up, I'm a baseball guy, and I loved Pete Rose, and he's the hit king. I think 4,278 hits, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. We all know what he did. But I still contend, if Pete would have admitted his mistake from day one and said, I screwed up and got help, he'd be in the Hall of Fame right now. He'd be managing somewhere right now. He'd be involved in baseball right now. I'm not saying, listen, it's incredibly horrible comparison here. But when you make a mistake like this as a head coach, you have to own it. You have to get on there and say, hey, look, I'm disappointed in the first 2 years. I'm very disappointed. We are going to make big strides this year, and we want everybody embracing us, and we welcome you. And I'm going to be on the Buddy Martin show next week. I mean, stuff like that. And then if you lose again, well, you know what? You got all that money they're going to buy you out, and you know what? You live a pretty good life. But don't sit there and think you can control the narrative, because that's not the way it works, guys.
Yeah. Good point. What do you see all over the country? Eat local, buy local, shop local.
Yeah.
Buddy Martin, do an interview with Buddy. Do an interview. All these coaches, quit. The national people will throw you overboard in a heartbeat. The local people will help you build equity. One of the better shows we've had. I love it. And we will be back tomorrow. We got Ben Troop, Dana Marquez. We're going to be talking Super Bowl, college football, college basketball, and Brenden. Unbelievable. Thank you. And we're going to start saying it every day. Billy Napier, sit down with Buddy Martin. You know what? He's earned the respect. You need to earn the respect of the Gator fan base by doing an interview with him. I mean, I don't know Billy Napier, but God, I thought he was a good coach. But when he does stuff like this, it makes my head spin. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Joe. See you on tomorrow. Weekend.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Good night, babe.
Bye-bye.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.